This MMA 30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana. Welcome back to the MMA 30 Radio Hour here on FM News Radio 100.5 KXNT. Dave Farra, Jason Mahoney, and Megan Olivi, our special guest. You can see Megan's fine work on HeavyMMA.com. Guys, we're talking about this whole UFC 137 debacle. It really fell apart this past week as far as the main card, and then instantly got put back together, and then got put back together some more, but in a very peculiar way. Nick Diaz got pulled off the main event against George St. Pierre. And then Dana White put Carlos Condit, who was scheduled to fight BJ Penn, up into the main event against GSP, giving him the title shot for the welterweight belt. However, Nick Diaz, who some people thought may get cut from the organization altogether, didn't even get demoted beneath the co-main event. Instead, Nick Diaz is going to be fighting BJ Penn at UFC 137 in the co-main event. I was shocked when I heard this. Yeah. Megan?
Oh, so was I. And I have to say, that's not the decision I would have made or expected Dana to make. You know, Dana, when he gets mad, he's mad. And he was mad at that press conference. And when he said, you know, if you guys could see what I'm trying to pull off, it would be, you know, you'd be shocked when he told us about who would be fighting BJ. And we were all kind of speculating. And I thought, well, maybe he's going to fight Gilbert Melendez at catchweight or something. That was really what I thought, you know, have Gilbert come in and maybe it would be hard convincing him because he's not really, you know, in training camp for a guy like BJ. But then he said Nick Diaz, and I just felt like, well, everything you said the day before is now out the window. You're giving a guy a fight. Maybe you're paying him less, but still, he's still on the card. And what did you teach him? Not really anything.
Well, I wouldn't say not. You didn't teach him anything. One, he's going to probably going to get a smaller payday because of this, and he's not getting a direct shot at the title, and that is huge. This is a shot at the UFC title, makes you a superstar for the most part, you know. And he has a chance now. Now he has to go through another contender to hopefully get another shot next.
But see, that's the problem, in my opinion, is that if Nick Diaz goes out there and he beats BJ Penn, then he's the one in the position where the UFC almost has to give him the title shot. Otherwise, the fans are going to be up in arms because he will have earned it again.
Right. And he's fighting a legend in BJ Penn, too. That's kind of an honor for guys to fight BJ. You hear everybody who takes a fight against him say, hey, it's an honor to fight a guy like BJ Penn. And now you're putting Nick Diaz in there who probably doesn't even care.
You know, I don't think that Nick Diaz doesn't necessarily care about this fight because fighting BJ Penn, as you said, is a legend. And I think it does matter to Nick Diaz who he fights. That's why he came over to the UFC, because he's tired of fighting guys who aren't recognized as some of the top fighters in the world. He is now under the UFC banner, and he's going to be fighting the top guys in the world, fighting BJ Penn. I think this is an incredibly exciting fight. I really like the Carlos Condit BJ Penn fight going into this, but I think Carlos Condit going against GSP actually makes a more exciting fight, and I actually think Nick Diaz versus BJ Penn actually makes a more exciting fight than Carlos Condit versus BJ Penn. So I think we as fans win all the way around. Nick Diaz does lose his shot at the title, but I think overall this is going to be an incredible card at UFC 137. I mean, two Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys going at it, two guys who like to bring the fight, and Nick Diaz and BJ Penn, two guys who have great ground skills, who have great stand-up, and both of them have great chins and love to fight. I mean, this has potential to be fight of the year in my opinion.
Let's handicap it. Who wins? That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
No?
Oh,
nope.
All right, Mahoney.
Nick Diaz wins. Easy.
Well, to be fair, Mahoney's wrong about everything.
No, I'm not. Here is where I give the edge to Nick Diaz, and here's where BJ Penn falls short every single time. BJ Penn falls short in cardio. Nick Diaz has been fighting 5-round fights. Yes, his fights don't go to decision because Nick Diaz likes to finish fights. Unfortunately for BJ's cardio at 170 pounds isn't the greatest. We saw that against John Fitch. He pretty much just fell apart in the second.
No, I disagree with that. I think that BJ's cardio held up pretty well in that fight. I thought that John Fitch just came up with a game plan that smothered BJ Penn, especially in that third round.
I think BJ, he shot for the moon in the first round and, wasn't able to keep up the pace that John Fitch pushes, and Nick Diaz pushes one of the most exciting fights, one of the most exciting paces in all of mixed martial arts. Look at that Paul Daly fight, man. I mean, you think BJ Penn could stick with that for 3 rounds? I don't think so.
Yeah, but I mean, Nick Diaz, if you're talking about the Paul Daly fight, I mean, that's not exactly a test of attrition. They were just wailing on each other's chins. If anything, I was not impressed with Nick Diaz in that Paul Daly fight at all.
That?
How could I say that? Because he almost got knocked out 4 times. He lucked out that he woke back up.
He showed tenacity, and he showed cage awareness where he
almost
was.
Got knocked out by the second-rate Paul Daly.
Because Paul Daly is the hardest-hitting 170-pound fighter in all of mixed martial arts. He's the hardest-hitting welterweight there is, and Diaz took everything he had multiple times, got up from it, and came back and knocked Daly's ass out.
Are you sweating right now? Because it looks like you're sweating.
I have hyperhidrosis. I'm sorry.
No, man, I disagree. I was not impressed with Nick Diaz in that fight at all. I don't think
you're a hater. I'm
not a hater.
You just
I
love
don't
him.
even. No, I don't. I hate Nick Diaz. I despise Nick Diaz. I was so upset at him to do this at the press conference. I am not a fan of Nick Diaz as a person. I'm a big fan of Nick Diaz as a fighter, though, because you have to respect what he's done. He comes to fight every time, and that's why I was excited about him fighting GSP, because a lot of the previous guys who fought GSP haven't come to fight, and that's one of the things about Nick Diaz. We know when he steps into that ring or that octagon, he comes to fight. Yes, Carlos Condit does as well, so I think that's a great replacement as well, because Carlos Condit comes to finish fights. We saw him finish his last 3 fights with emphasis, so I'm okay with the switch.
Here's where we're going to disagree again, is that I don't have a problem with Nick Diaz personally. I think that his character is kind of entertaining. I don't like when he doesn't show up for things that he's actually promised to show up. I think that just makes him a liar and a bad person. But outside of that, I don't really have a problem with Nick Diaz. I just don't think he's really that impressive of a fighter in the sense that he always wants to fight the other person's strength. Look, you have to respect his record. He's 25-7. He's on a great win streak right now, but look who he's on a win streak over. Frank Shamrock, Scott Smith, KJ Noons is a pretty good fighter. He almost lost to Cyborg Santos.
Because
he almost lost to Cyborg Santos.
He didn't almost lose to Santos. He stood up with Santos.
Because he stood up with Santos. And why did he almost lose to Paul Daly?
Because
he stood up with Paul Daly.
Nick Diaz puts on exciting fights, man, and you gotta respect him for that. He's finished 9 out of his last 10 fights.
And here's the other part that I'm going to disagree with you on is the whole people fight George St. Pierre and they don't come to fight, so that's the reason. No, George St. Pierre is just so much better than everyone else that it doesn't matter how much fight you bring, you're going to fall short. It's the same thing that everyone said about Anderson Silva, and they said, "Oh, wait till Forrest Griffin gets in there because he's going to bring the." It doesn't matter. Some guys are just on a different level. George St. Pierre is one of them.
Diaz would have been the most well-rounded fighter
that
George St. Pierre ever would have fought.
Terrible game plans that don't work. He almost lost to 2 average fighters in Cyborg Santos and Paul Daly.
Diaz was doing what he had to do to get to where he is. Had he not been putting on those exciting fights, had he not been finishing, they wouldn't have brought him over to the UFC. They wouldn't have given him a title shot.
So this was all some big master plan of Nick Diaz to get where he needed to be?
You're saying the Caesar Gracie camp, they don't know what they're doing over there, yet they have Jake Shields, yet they have Gilbert Melendez.
Who said that?
Wait, look. No one said the Caesar Gracie camp doesn't know what they're doing. I'm saying there's not some big master plan that Nick Diaz was enacting for him to get to where he needed to be and then not show up at 2 press conferences and lose his opportunity. If that was the master plan, you really messed it up, all right, Nick? I'm going to disagree with you that Nick Diaz fights smart fights. I'm not going to say that he doesn't fight exciting.
I'm not saying he does, but I think he will.
Why would he change his ways this time?
Because the UFC is a different beast than Strikeforce.
Oh, and obviously he has a tremendous amount of respect.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he shows no cares.
We'll see. We will see.
What,
we will
did you see the video he made?
Yes, I saw the video. You know, I think Nick
driving a Scion down the street, all kind of out of it. I mean, what was that a Scion? It looked like a Scion.
No, it was a Chevy pickup.
Was it?
Because remember, every time after
that's right, he gets free Chevys.
He always shouts out his Chevy dealership there in Stockton.
Who drives a car and films himself at the same time on the highway, merging onto an exit?
And he's honking and cussing at people.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your take on the Diaz and BJ Penn fight? Who do you think wins it?
You know, I really don't know. I don't know. It depends how Diaz comes out there and fights. But I know BJ is training at the Ruka facility in California, so I know he's trying to make as many changes as he can to his game and be prepared. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this is short notice for everybody." Not really. This is like 7 weeks out.
Yeah, we're not talking about like you're a couple of weeks before a fight. We're talking October 29th.
Koscheck stepping in for Hughes, that's short notice. Mm-hmm. But I think these guys
stepping in for Sanchez. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, for Sanchez against Hughes. So I think that I think BJ can come out with this. I think BJ can get this win. And But I don't know. I mean, Diaz, he has the ability to surprise, but I've got to go with BJ if I had to pick one.
Who is BJ training with? Yes, he's training at the Ruka facility, but who is BJ Penn training with?
Yeah,
that's been the problem. BJ Penn training in Hawaii it's just a recipe for disaster.
But see, here's the thing: is that I used to be in that camp too, where I'd go, "Oh, who is BJ Penn training with?" Mm-hmm. But unless you're really around him, it's tough to say, because on MMA Live on ESPN last week, they were saying the same thing about Forrest Griffin after he lost, how he did to Shogun Rua. They were like, "Oh, who's he even training with? Is he even training at all?" And being here in Las Vegas, for example, we know firsthand that Forrest Griffin was working very hard preparing for that fight against Shogun at Throwdown Training Center and over at Extreme Couture. But because we're outside of that bubble, we don't live over in Hawaii, we're not down to the Ruka facility in Southern California, it's tough to say. I'm not going to accuse BJ Penn of not training for this fight.
It's going to be interesting, and the lines are out. There's already a couple lines out. There's not a whole lot out, but Nick Diaz is the favorite going into this fight. Nick Diaz is even, and BJ Penn is at minus 130.
That means that BJ Penn's the favorite.
What did I say?
You said Nick Diaz is the favorite.
Well, yep, I'm mistaken here.
I
got all fired up.
So BJ Penn's a slight favorite. And you know what? It's an interesting proposition, because I'm curious. I don't know off the top of my head, and I apologize, but I'm curious what the reach advantage is going to be for Nick Diaz. He's got long arms.
Yeah.
BJ Penn, on the other hand, is a pretty small guy to be fighting at welterweight. He can cut down and make 155, as we've seen many times in the past. He's not a huge guy at 170 pounds. How much bigger is Nick Diaz going to be?
Nick Diaz has a 4-inch reach advantage on BJ Penn. BJ Penn has a 70-inch reach advantage. Nick Diaz has a 74-inch reach advantage. And we've seen Nick Diaz, we've seen him show his boxing skills. I have a feeling that this fight is probably going to stay up. I mean, unless we see BJ try to do what he did to Fitch and try to take him down, but taking Nick Diaz down is going to be a hard thing to do.
Have we ever seen BJ Penn get outboxed, though?
Frankie Edgar?
No, I mean, I guess
Twice.
that's a good point. But BJ Penn didn't really get beat up in that fight, in the sense that he was losing the boxing game. Frankie just did a good job of avoiding him.
Yeah, almost like a Dominic Cruz approach to fighting.
Yeah, a very, very fast, hard to take down, elusive style of fighting.
A boxing style point match. That's how Frankie Edgar beat BJ Penn. He didn't beat up BJ Penn. John Fitch beat up BJ Penn, but Frankie Edgar just outpointed him.
If you're John Fitch, how mad are you right now?
You're mad, but you can't be surprised. I mean, John Fitch, I still think that he's like a good 2 or 3, maybe even 4 fights away from getting another title shot. Maybe if George St. Pierre loses, he would move up in the ranks, but no one's clamoring for the John Fitch rematch, which is unfortunate, because a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have John Fitch ranked at number 2 in the world.
Yeah, and when I asked Dana actually about John Fitch, I said, is he going to fill in? Is he going to fight BJ? And he said, well, we offered him to Matt Hughes to replace Diego Sanchez, and he said no, that he couldn't possibly be ready. So then even though this fight is a month after that, he said, no, John Fitch will not be stepping in, is not even considered.
Interesting. All right. When we come back here on the MMA 30 Radio Hour, we're going to break down the rest of the UFC 137 card. It's here in Las Vegas, and in my opinion, it is one of the best fight cards of the entire year. More talk about UFC 137 in just a moment. Plus, we'll hear from UFC President Dana White, his entire take, our exclusive MMA 30 interview that we did on site on the day of the press conference. Plus, the welterweight champion himself, George St. Pierre, coming up here on the MMA 30 Radio Hour, 100.5 FM News Radio. This is KXNT. This MMA 30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana.